I say a certain thing about what's going on in the culture, somehow, by the grace of God, he points his finger at me, because the first law of government is self-government. And almost everything that you get in God is progressive. Meaning that even if I think I'm walking in love, what level is it? Well, the comparison is to Jesus, okay? And then what one person may experience as love toward them, another person may feel like you're not doing hardly anything. And I can tell you, under an inundation of characterizations like that is out there. But the point I want to get across to you is that the whole church, if it was at the level that it's supposed to be, Jesus would come get us, okay? So don't get frustrated and don't go to your emotions all the time, because when people aren't living it the way they're living it, God's still going to look at you, because how people are not living it should be an indicator to you to say, I'm going to turn mine up another level. What another person is not, maybe God's ordaining you to be it at the level that could spread. Okay? So I'm like that now. I'm just saying, if I'm going to fuss about something, somehow, by the grace of God, I'm going to have examined my heart to see am I walking in at the right level. And I'm going to answer that for you, and I answered it for me. I was at prayer at the Father's house, and I answered that in some areas where I said, am I at the level that God would require for a whole world to be made after me? Well, what I didn't answer is the point that I've done a whole message on, this point of every family is a world. The point I make is how a man runs his house is how he would run a world. Husband, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Okay, there you are. I know a lot of husbands whose wives give themselves more toward the husband than the husband gives himself towards the wife. But it said, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And I know wives that say, he just doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. But then the other part of it says, submit to your husband's woman, wife, as unto the Lord. Do you do that as unto the Lord? Or are you responding to his inappropriate behavior towards you with inappropriate behavior in response to it? So you're letting a human condition determine your state of being, while your revelation should determine your state of being, your relationship with God. Now, I said on the line the other day that when I got to Switzerland, this Mr. Keller called. He said, I've heard Paul and I've heard some others. He said, I've heard the Boone doctrines. And I would say that's one of the Boone doctrines right there. That's it, right? That's one of them. But it's really the scripture. But it's something that most of the Christianity, if you've listened to me, that's been emphasized. And yeah, I get frustrated, but first at myself. I want to govern myself. So if I don't walk in forgiveness, then I am walking in unforgiveness. It's not, well, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Of course, that's always the case. But the spiritual motivation is, if you don't forgive your brother his trespasses, neither do your Father forgive you your trespasses. And in what is it, Luke 11, where we used to quote all the time, have faith in God. He's not talking about faith as in progressive kind of faith. He's talking about live out the faith, have it, let it be working inside of you. You walk in forgiveness. You're not going to be able to get to heaven and say, those people didn't love me, so I don't want nothing to do with them. Oh, yeah, they're just troubled Christians. God said, wait a minute, I'm going to ultimately judge them, but what kind of Christians were you in response to that? That's what he's going to say. So, and I think of that about myself, and I said it Friday in the prayer meeting at the Father's house. I know I'm not living up to the standard because there's subjective areas like vacation. I mean, say like the company you work for, if you've been there, say long standing, they may give you like 4 weeks, some give 6 weeks, and etc. Well, what if you use all the 6 weeks for your own pleasure and you didn't give like what about half of it? Or let's just say 2 weeks of it toward missions work. Or in your salary and you get a bonus and you spend the bonus on something you've always wanted. What about giving half of the bonus towards the cause of Christ? Those are subjective things, but they're indicators. God is not neutral about it. So that's why when I look at myself and I say, am I living this all the way? I say, well, absolutely not. Am I purposely not? No way. I'm trying to do this thing all the way. But humility says, help me, Father, to live it all the way. I can say that I can't find anything in the New Testament where Jesus said, I'm taking a vacation now from you nonsense people. He'd go pray away from them. And with Paul, John the Baptist, it looks like all those guys, 3.5 years with Jesus. Jesus, what about my family? I don't have an obligation to my family. 3.5 years. I'm being discipled. But for what? To change the world as an ambassador of Christ. They were made to live at the time Christ came. And they were the good ground people that the Lord chose to take what he gave them to the whole world. And it's continuing today. And that's part of the other, I would say, boom doctrine that I want to talk about is the continuation of the revelation of who we are. The reason you are living is because you came from a seed. Not only did you come from God, but somebody else who was of God sowed into you. Somebody who was of God sowed into the people that sowed into you. We are a continuing church that's going from glory to glory. This revival that we talk about in meetings is occurring in the way you live in your life. If you're saved, it's not that Christ is not there. No, of course he's there in you if you're born again. But it's the release of Christ through your yieldedness, obedience, your being in the things of God as the primary essence of your life. That's the life of God. That's revival. Okay? And I don't know that in terms of that, I can't say I get it all the time. There are times like, okay, now I'm just gonna, be honest with you, I was talking to Gordon Robertson a few weeks ago and I said, I'm gonna go to the nations, what I said to you, and preach where they're hungry, where they want it, and, and stay for however long. Now I know people, and I know of people who are Americans who've planted churches in nations, and they live in the nation 6 months. They live in the United States 6 months. Some of them live in those other nations. They come itinerate in the United States, but they live in those other nations. They're Americans, and even American blacks. So when we start looking at our lives, this is the most comfortable country, and that's subjective, to live in. But I can say clearly, our issues and arguments, our pettiness, lots of it is not even kingdom stuff worth talking about. But we do talk about it. Why? We live in such a great country where we have it made. And yet none of the apostles had it made. Jesus didn't have it made. John the Baptist didn't have it made. Paul didn't have it made. Everything didn't go right. The issue wasn't whether things were going right with them. It was whether they were living right for him. That's the point. Are you living right under every situation? See? But in your family, do you want your family, your children to be the husband you are, or be the father you are, or be the wife you are, or be the mother you are? See? But when a manager manages a company and they have maybe supervisors under them, and then under them maybe, some other types of leaders that go all the way down to the people. But the point is, sometimes in those companies, they feel like if another person gets promoted, they're going to lose their job. They don't realize that they try to bring the staff to a level of promotability. They think they get pushed out, but they don't. In the economy of God, they get pushed up. See? Humble yourself, you shall be exalted. Whoever is on you, over you, if you're exalted, you lift them up. It's not a matter of position. It's a matter of union with Christ. I'm screaming. You guys started it like that. But you got to get this. That's a boon doctrine. Okay, so one is forgiveness. That's Mark 11, 25. Read it. But then this matter of forgiveness, the essence of Christ's coming is that he would die, suffer, die, be resurrected, so that we could be forgiven by God the Father. God the Father is a forgiver. I mean, just to tolerate us through the centuries is amazing forgiveness from the Father. But you were made by him physically. You're now born again. You're made by him spiritually. You have the power to forgive. Otherwise, you're unforgiven. See? So I know that it's difficult to believe that maybe the biggest challenge of your life is you're mismanaging the grace of God, the favor of God, the family you're born into, the job that God's given you, the education, the ability to be able to be educated, to understand what you learned in college, and then to get a job, and then be promoted. That's the grace of God on your life. But maybe that grace of God took you away from God rather than took you toward him. Maybe you didn't use your management skills to lead people under you to the level that God brought you to. Not just the job. It's the point of life. Now, okay, and so the point of life is promotability. You're already of God, 1 Peter 1, being born again, not of corruptible seed, but incorruptible seed by the word of God. You're already born again. So now is there a ceiling on God? Do you think that when you get chronologically old, there's a ceiling on your being able to grow? I mean, I'm 75 and I feel like I'm still, my God, I need to grow up. That's what I feel like. Am I praying? I've said this to you. Am I praying hard enough? I haven't travailed down there on my altar in a while. How often should I do it? I don't know. God didn't even tell me I had to do it. I saw that was a premise to give me a mindset of seriousness. So I put things in my way. As an old person, sometimes I put things in the way. If I know I have to go out the door and I need to take something with me, I put it in front of the door. I'm going to go out. Or if I have clothes I want to take with me to have a change, I put it on the door handle that I have to open. I put it in my way. Sometimes, whatever, if that works for you, we're trying to be more and more like Christ. There's no chronological ceiling on that. Part of the reason people think you're younger than what you are isn't because you don't have wrinkles or you dye your hair or something. It's because there is a spirit. Be renewed in the spirit of your mind. Does that mean be old in your mind? No, it means you're being more and more invigorated by the things of God. And that makes you fresh. You can have an old tone in your voice, but yet have a on fire spirit. Your youth is that you are growing spiritually and that God, who is eternal, hasn't put a ceiling on keeping you strong in the Lord and the power of his might. Now turn to Leviticus 25 with me. And then Acts 2. I want to just bring out a couple of points with you. Got to see this, people. I mean, goodness gracious. I don't want to be messed up in this world because God is not going to let me mess up another one. If a man divorces a wife or a wife divorces a husband and they didn't learn anything from God in the first marriage, they're just going to mess up two marriages. They don't get better in the second marriage. They mess both of them up. There has to be learning lessons in the first marriage. God hadn't even ordained two marriages, except natural marriage and spiritual marriage, but not marriage. And I don't even know how many people on this phone has been married multiple times. It's not the unforgiveness, the unpardonable sin. A lot of people do learn in their first marriage because they married as kids. They married for the wrong reasons, with lust. They all these different reasons. And then after they've been in it for a while, they realize, oh, God. And a lot of them never resolve it. Some of them in their first marriage never forgave their husband or forgave their wives. And yet they're married to another one. They brought over with them that spirit of unforgiveness in that new marriage. Still there. And sometimes the reason that marriage don't work is that they see some of the signs in the person of the former marriage and they're reacting to it. They're not reacting to that person being like their former wife or husband. They're reacting like that because they're holding unforgiveness. They're sensitive toward something that they didn't see the blood covered, blotted out. Like he blots out our transgressions. He doesn't just, and your sins and iniquities he doesn't remember. The challenge with you is you remember. You say, well, I forget a lot of things. You don't forget unforgiveness. No, you're holding on to that as though that's some treasure. That's trash. Unforgiveness is the trash of life. The great treasure of life is forgiveness. Now, I took it further. I've given it to you before. I've taken it further. All authority has been given to me. Why would God give you great power with you being the kind of person that holds unforgiveness in your heart? Now, I saw a video from a guy called the Green Prince. He was former Hamas. His daddy helped start it. He said it. It's on YouTube. You can get it. But his great issue is, he said, Hamas and is leading the Palestinian people in hating Israel. And yet one of the points he discovered is that Israel is the safe place, the safe country in all the Middle East. He said they could destroy all of its enemies. It hasn't. It tolerates them. He says things like, when you become a citizen of Israel, you're treated like an Israelite. You're not even treated like an outsider. He says it's a great country. This was a former Hamas person who eventually said this Hamas is the enemy of the Palestinians. See, that's not my point. The point he makes is hatred is the essence of the illogical conclusion of unforgiveness is hatred. And there's no self-government in hatred, because those same accusers of Israel are the ones that is doing the damage. They're blaming another country while they're damaging their own country. He said, I lived there. I knew all the leaders of every country that was terrorists. He knew all of them. He names them. He knows them all. But the point I'm making isn't about Hamas or terrorists. It's about unforgiveness and hatred. Just because you got a Christian title doesn't mean you're not hating. If you got unforgiveness, there's some people you're like sharp with them. You're sharp with them. Unforgiveness. Better get that stuff out. Better get it right. I'm saying to you, you better get that stuff right. You want to face God. Now, what also happens to me is at this age, okay, so now, I think about death. Not often, but I think about it. But there's no spiritual death in the way that we think of it. And that's what I want to bring out here as a point in this Leviticus 25. It's natural death because the bodies weren't made to live forever. God is making you another body, 2 Corinthians chapter 5. You know that. But you, the you that's looking at me right now, or that's listening to me right now, are going to be you in that body. And that body is going to reflect the glory that you've been transformed to. That's some powerful stuff. The light. You are the light of the world. But not everybody's light has the same wattage. See, you're the salt. Some of you, your salt it has mixture. It's not very good. It's not a saving salt, savior salt. It has the ability to do something, but not all salt is the same. See? Come on, Christians. Come on, believers. See? So when I say let's hit it, I mean, come on. The Lord has not lessened his love for you, his life in you, his consecration gifting upon you. He hasn't lessened any of it. You got to reject it, not to be it. Did you hear that? But you can be it stronger than you've ever been it. I'm just saying. From faith to faith, from grace to grace, from strength to strength, from glory to glory, meaning you can be increased in each of those categories. And I guarantee you, each of those categories, for you to increase in them, it'll take less of you and more of him. How does that also work? Watch this. Less of letting people affect you and more of letting God affect you. Okay? You hear me? Hugely important. Leviticus 25. This Sabbath year, I've talked with you. I have completed, I don't have the completed copy of it, my emancipation booklet. Mr. Ellenwood sent me this booklet. I think I've done the final edit, and I called it originally Basic Black Briefings. I think it probably still is in that category, but it's in the Emancipation Proclamation here. It's some critical stuff here in it that I believe are significantly important that God graced our country with, that it seems like the appreciation and celebration for what happened isn't continuing. The ability and faithfulness of God is continuing, but our celebration of what he's done to be examples of newness every day is not as prevalent as it could be. So in Leviticus 25, verse 1, while Moses was on Mount Sinai, the Lord said to him, "Give the following instructions to the people of Israel. When you have entered the land I am giving you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath rest before the Lord every seventh year." Continue. I'm reading verse 3. For 6 years you may plant your fields and prune your vineyards and harvest your crops. But during the seventh year, the land must have a Sabbath year of complete rest. It is the Lord's Sabbath. Now, powerful, powerful stuff here. Every seventh year. Now, what I'm going to come to is this 50th year. See, now let me go down to verse 8. I gotta roll with it. Verse 8, Leviticus 25, if you're with me. In addition, you must count off every seven Sabbath years, 7 sets of 7 years, adding up to 49 years in all. Then on the Day of Atonement, in the 50th year, blow the ram's horn loud and long throughout the land. Set this year apart as holy, a time to proclaim freedom throughout the land for all who live there. It will be a jubilee year for you. And if each of you may return to the land that belongs to your ancestors and return to your own. This 50th year will be a jubilee for you. During that year, you must not plant your fields or store away any of the crops that grow on their own. And don't gather the grapes from your unpruned vines. It will be a jubilee year for you, and you must keep it holy. This is some powerful stuff, okay? Powerful, powerful stuff. Now, let me just make this statement again to say that these Israelites becomes the visible, physical, historical people group that God made himself known to. They were known as the people that served the living God. And their value, their significance was the determination that God made for them. It wasn't something that they did on their own. It's something that God did. And I would say that premise is the premise for all of us. I mean, you look at you, no matter how awesome you believe you may be, and or how obedient you have been. I want to say this: God did that. You understand this? Meaning that you are the one that God brought into this world, and if you're awesome, it's His awesomeness. I mean, the families you're born into, the gender you are, the ability you have, God did that. God himself did it. Now, the disconnect with creation itself is that fact. I mean, almost, well, there's scores, maybe half of the world summarily say that I'm a product of evolution. God, I don't know of any God that did it. So they give him no glory. And then some of the people who believe that there is a God, they don't take it to this kind of thought that I'm having right now, and that is that they are the product of something God wanted to bring into the earth, and therefore their reason for existence should go back to the God that brought them into the earth. I mean, any discovery, invention, etc., the point of the discovery or the invention is that it would be what it was invented to be, and that it would function optimally. Well, that's true about creation itself. The way that God himself defines creation, you and me, is I make you in my image after my likeness. The disconnect is you still can hardly find anybody that believes they are like God. Well, if I said this, are you godly? They would say, well, I try to be. Well, what does being godly mean? They go straight to whether they have the gifts of the Spirit or what religion, what church do you go to, all of that. Not that in their spiritual bloodline, in their existence, that they can be viewed as someone who is like God in thought, word, and deed. That people would conclude if there is a God, they must be like you, listening to me right now or looking at me. They must be like you. Well, we have people that say God couldn't be black. We enslaved people because of their race. We enslaved them because of their economic circumstances. We mistreat people because of their lack of education, on and on. But those same people were made by the same one that made those people that mistreated them. Now, you can say naturally they are godly in the sense that they came from God. But in their behavior, nonsense. There's no way God acts like that. And the Lord acknowledged that. all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Which says what? You are ordained to carry and to be the glory